2060. Some committee members are present in chambers, and others are attending virtually. Also in attendance are other council members who are not members of the committee and people making presentations. Since today's meeting involves a discussion or presentation for informational purposes, we will not suspend the meeting if an individual member's feed is disrupted. We will work to resolve that issue, but the presentation will continue. If we experience any technical difficulties that affect the public's ability to see the meeting as a whole, we will suspend the meeting while we attempt to resolve the issue. While the meeting is suspended, all discussion of public business will cease and no action will be taken. If after 10 minutes the issue cannot be resolved, the meeting will stand adjourned. This is a continuation of our hearings on the FY22 capital and operating budgets. Today we will hear from Civic Innovation and Technology and the Office of Performance Improvement. I'm Bill Hollander, the committee chair. I'm present here in chambers. Also with us, the council members here are council members Armstrong, Arthur, Winkler, George, McCraney, Engel, Flood. I believe that's it presently. I know there will be some other people joining us. Councilwoman Fowler has an excused absence from today's hearings. We will begin, I believe, with Civic Innovation and Technology. Again, I will just sort of set the ground rules here that we've been doing throughout this. We've asked every department to keep their presentations relatively brief. We certainly want to hear about changes that are proposed for their department and some of the other great work they're doing. And I know there's always an inclination to talk about all the great work that you've done over the years and over the year, particularly this year. And we certainly appreciate that. But so that we can have time for questions, we've asked that the presentations be relatively brief. And then we've asked that council members ask 2, no more than 3 questions and get back into the queue. Certainly we want them to have all their questions answered as well. But we ask that they would get back in the queue and let other people go ahead and make their presentations. So again, we'll start with Civic Innovation and Technology. And Chris C.I.T, the Director of Information Technology, I believe you are here to begin.
That's correct. Thank you, Chair Hollander and members of the Budget Committee. And I did have one quick thing. I think Grace is sitting in the queue to be let into the meeting. I believe she had some opening comments for us.
Chris, I'm so sorry. This is Sonia, the Metro Council clerk. I just emailed her. There's something wrong with her connection. I can't make her a panelist. If she wants to move, try to log out and try again.
Okay. I'll relay that to her as well. So in the interim, I can go ahead and get started with the IT presentation here. The Office of Civic Innovation and Technology has obviously been very busy over the last year and a half with the pandemic response that the city's put forward, and wanted to spend a few minutes just showing kind of what we're working on. So as you all have seen previously, our mission is to build data and technology platforms to ready our government for our community's digital future. And our vision is that our Louisville Metro is prepared for emerging technologies to ensure our entire community reaches its full potential. We do that through our strategy, which is a continuous investment in our people, security and compliance work, breakthrough innovation, enterprise systems, continuous service improvement, and equitable hiring and business practices. This is a brief overview of our organizational chart on the information technology side. You can see we report up to the Chief of Civic Innovation and Technology, Grace Simmerall. In terms of functions, IT is involved in every business unit of Metro government in some form or fashion, be it from the payroll systems that people use to log their time and receive their paychecks, through our city website, the telephones that people use in their various offices, and a variety of computers that are deployed throughout the Metro government. In terms of major initiatives that are underway, we have our eMERGE project, which is a joint collaboration project between the Office of Management and Budget, the Information Technology Department, and Human Resources. That project is currently slated for launch in March of 2022. In addition, we're continuing our work to improve our network through equipment modernization and segmentation. Work has been underway now for about 2 years, and we anticipate we have at least another 18 months of work to fully retrofit the government network. In addition, we've just recently kicked off the RFP review process for our public safety system modernization. This will be a replacement for our computer-aided dispatch police records management, and inmate management systems that our various public safety agencies use today. Many of those systems date back to 2004, 2005 in terms of when they were first installed. We're definitely at a point where we need to take on that replacement project. We're continuously working on our cybersecurity enhancements. That can include adding new tools, user education, and adding capabilities to our team. We're also, of course, we're doing this meeting virtually, but some of you are in chambers, trying to figure out better ways to deal with our hybrid workforce. So we have some folks that are going to continue to work remotely, while we have a lot of people that have never left the office or are returning to the office now. So we're trying to figure out how to make that work, because as you know, we have a lot of people in a room and a bunch of different computers. You end up with a lot of feedback and other issues that can come up. And of course, one of the bigger ones is starting to modernize our public websites. The last major refresh of our city website was back in 2014. So we're beginning that process. We recently, with your assistance, sending out to your constituents, asked for resident feedback on how best to improve our website. And then during COVID, of course, we've been very busy. Wanted to share some brief information with you about that. WebEx has been a very popular platform. We've had 2.45 million meeting minutes conducted on the WebEx platform since last May. We've had 55,000 plus virtual meetings in that time, and we've had 295,000 different devices join those meetings. That can be constituents, employees, guests. It's a large number. In terms of DocuSign, we rolled that out in April of last year, and we've seen nearly 2 million pages of paper that may have otherwise been printed or needed a manual signature sent through that platform, netting some printing savings as well as a lot of efficiency. And of course, we've deployed over 2,300 laptops since the start of the pandemic, which is 40% of our entire computer fleet. And we've done infrastructure improvements to handle the increased load of having a workforce that's working from home. And then one of our goals that we'd set was our Paper Free by 23 initiative, which was a 40% reduction in our paper consumption. We've actually gotten pretty close to that goal already, thanks to the pandemic. And then 80% of all of our computers are now laptops. Our goal was to have that hit 80% by 2023. So the pandemic accelerated our rollout of that platform. And then one last thing related to cybersecurity, we continue to monitor the landscape around ransomware. Most recently, the DC Police, Gary, Indiana, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, all suffered ransomware attacks, varying levels of disruption to their services. We're now seeing the attackers become better educated and more sophisticated with their types of attacks. And we continue to try to prepare the users and our equipment to fight off those types of attacks when they occur. And with that, I have concluded the IT presentation.
Thank you, Chris. Is Grace in the meeting yet? Ms. Simrall, this is Grace Simrall, the Chief of Civic Innovation and Technology.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Budget Chair Hollander, Vice Chair Kramer, and the rest of the Budget Committee members and the other members of Metro Council who are here attending our budget hearing. I wanted to just say very quickly that, as you've heard me say in previous years, we believe that Louisville Metro government can be a high-performing organization, but to do so, we really do need to embrace continuous improvement and breakthrough innovation throughout all levels of government, which is part of why we have these dedicated resources, again, ensuring that we have both an efficient and effective government. So I'm very pleased that the Office of Performance Improvement and Civic Innovation Technology are under the same roof again. We've said before that we're two sides of the same coin, and we work very well and complement the work of again, doing continuous improvement and breakthrough innovation. And with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation piece to our Director of Performance Improvement, Dr. Ursula Mullins.
Thank you so much, Grace. And I have a few slides that I sent in, if we're able to get those up. If not, I don't want to hold anyone up. I can go ahead and begin.
You would have to share those yourself, Dr. Mullins.
Okay, give me just 1 second. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start. I don't want to belabor the meeting. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much, Chairman Hollander, and to all the other council members. I appreciate the time to be here with you today. We are certainly excited to be able to be before you and present for this year. I'm going to share my slides here. Here we go. All right, sorry about that delay. All right, so thank you. It's a pleasure to be before you today. So for the Office of Performance Improvement, and we have some mission and values that are established here. We are here to strengthen Louisville Metro government's culture of performance excellence. And our mission is to do that by performing in the top quartile of performance. And our brand is that we want to help government improve. So we are here to do just that. I'm very proud to be here and part of a legacy of continuous improvement and performance management that is about a decade old in Louisville Metro government. And this office has been having an impact throughout Metro, as we are also a service agency that really touches all of the agencies in Metro government. So here's our organizational chart, which was submitted to you all with our budget documents here. You'll see listed here. We do have 2 vacancies for which we are looking to find some great talent. And so we hope to have those filled soon. They're for the LouisStat program manager and for an OPI coach. So our essential functions here, as Grace mentioned before, is to really lead the way on performance improvement for Metro government and to really make sure that this mindset is embedded in the culture of the agencies of government so that we can increase our efficiencies and make sure that that is pushed down into all facets of the government. So one of the ways we do that is with what we call a performance management system. So a lot of people, when they think of OPI, they think of LouisStat, and that's great. It's one of our brands that's nationally known. LouisStat is one part of a performance management system. That's the part where we actually measure what we're doing. So when you think of LouisStat, think of trying to figure out what are we doing, how well are we doing it, and how can we do it better. That's what LouisStat is all about. So our departments have been going through forums, and they have since 2012 to measure their performance on key performance indicators. That program is robust. Last year, well, actually at the end of 2019, the website was taken down. It was in transition because as LouisStat 2.0 was launched, there's a new format for our KPI reports. During that time, the staff were trying to revamp the website to make it fit the new format for our KPI reports. However, just due to 2020 with staff turnover and resignations and things like that, we were not able to get it back up just due to personnel. However, we are working with IT right now and having discussions so that hopefully by the end of June or early July, the LouisStat website will be up. However, the meetings are still happening. So the other part of performance management is not just measuring what we're doing, it's also that continuous improvement part of problem solving. So we regularly invoke this PDCA, which is Plan, Do, Check, Act technique, which is a really great way and structured way to do problem solving, and it helps you kind of spin the wheel quickly on identifying what your problems are, and it's a methodology that helps you solve problems quickly and efficiently. We also do other things like continuous improvement with Lean and Six Sigma, and we have project management skills as well. We do this through our performance partners. So as you all can see, OPI is lean right now in terms of our staff. However, OPI has been training staff throughout Metro government for as long as it's been in existence. And we do have a wonderful cadre of performance partners who are seated in the departments. And they have been trained by OPI to help with LouisStat and to do these problem solving. So we work with our performance partners and through our performance partners to do a lot of the work that we do. And we appreciate that network, and it's continually growing as we have new hires come on and people get appointed to those positions. So our format this year for LouisStat is a little bit different. We are still having the forums, but these forums right now are designed in a way such that department directors are reporting out directly to their chiefs. One of the reasons that we thought this would be a good idea is it really continues the thought of trying to drill this discipline down into the organization and make sure that it's embedded. So the former format was that OPI would convene the groups of folks together, we'd host the forums and facilitate those. Well, all of those skills now are really within the departments. And so we want to take the work a little bit closer to where it's seated. And so directors are doing that directly with their chiefs. And so, as I said, those are ongoing. And by the end of June, maybe early July, our website will be back up for the public. We are broadly partnered nationally and locally. We have affiliations with universities here. They help us on all kinds of things, from employee engagement to helping us with some surveys if we need that. One of the things that we're most proud of is that for 2020, OPI, or the city of Louisville, I should say, was awarded the platinum designation with What Works City. We were one of only 2 cities to reach that designation. And if you guys can remember, in years past, we've been consistently improving. We've gone from bronze to silver to gold, and now platinum, which is the highest level that we could reach with this organization so far. We are hoping that they'll find a new designation so that we can continue to strive to meet those criteria of a high-performing, very efficient government. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions, and I guess I would remind council members that we're looking not only at the operating budget, but also at the capital budget, and there are significant capital expenditures for information technology. So we'll be asking some questions about those as we move on. First of all, I want to ask about personnel, though. These are 2 departments where we would be, I think, adding personnel, particularly on the performance improvement side, and particularly in the case of project managers. And I'll just say at the outset, particularly with the federal money that we received last year and that we will be receiving in the next couple of years, I think having project managers to manage those projects is really pretty essential. We saw some situations this year where the council suggested, for example, that we move to a deflection model. And I know there was some frustration among some council members that we weren't moving quickly enough. And I think part of it was there were really a project manager to sort of lead that effort. So could you speak about the additional personnel, I guess, on both the performance improvement side and on civic innovation and technology? Anyone who wants to take the floor.
Sure, Chairman, this is Ursula Mullins. I will respond to that, and then I will pass that over to Keith Talley to talk a little bit more. So certainly I can respond to the need for project management within Metro government. I think I completely echo your sentiments that a lot of work that we need to do, especially with the addition of the ARP funds, is going to require some dedicated personnel who have that skill and that discipline to really be able to manage those projects that will be coming from the proposals for that money. So 100% I agree with that. So there is a proposal to add 5 project management positions into this department, and those positions will be dedicated to working on that. In the long term picture, I do think that it's important that Metro government have a designated number of project management positions, even if it weren't for just the ARC projects. As you mentioned, there are capital projects that are in the pipeline and some that have been in the pipeline. And project management and that discipline are the types of skill sets that we would need to help us move forward on many of those projects that we have. In addition to other positions that we have, as I mentioned, we have a senior, well, I didn't mention, but we have a senior performance coach, and we have 2 vacancies for which we are looking to hire some folks for the Louis Step program manager, as well as the OPI coach. And then we are looking to bring over an employee who had been working in public health, but had been assigned to do work with the resilience strategy and other work with OPI, to just formally transfer her over to this department. And then finally, Keith Talley, who I will turn it over to, has been transferred into this department as well, and he will be able to speak more on the project management positions.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. And Chairman Hollander, council members, glad to be here this afternoon. And so as Dr. Mullins mentioned, we do have a budget that's been placed in OPI to cover, at this point, we think 4 to 5 positions, including a supervisor, a project management supervisor, and that's really going to be dependent on the salaries that we have to pay to recruit that personnel. And our sole support at the beginning is going to be to help support agencies in the development and the implementation of their ARP-related projects. But we also want to be able to provide additional support to move some current capital projects that are already in the queue and move them to implementation and then to completion. Additionally, we are researching project management software that will be used enterprise-wide, which is going to be beneficial from both an operational efficiency standpoint and from a reporting standpoint. We will bring on this project management in kind of a stage format, and so we are in a process of posting for 2 staff project managers at this point, and we'll bring them on slowly as we build projects. We are also hopeful that we will be able to use some of that ARP funding to provide contract project management support for some of those projects that we know are only going to last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, as opposed to utilizing Metro staff personnel when we know that project's going to end and that person can move on. As we look at the guidance, we're not 100% sure whether we will be able to do that at this point, but that's a question that we're are posing to Treasury at this time. If anyone has any additional questions, I would be happy to answer those.
I don't have any additional questions about that. I'm sure other people will as we follow up. I want to ask one other question, then pass on to other people who are in the queue, and that's GVI funding. GVI funding, as I understand it, resides in OPI. And my question is, and that's I believe a $550,000 proposed appropriation. How is it selected that it would be in OPI? Who is going to, on the Metro side? Metro employees will be managing GVI, and I don't know who can speak about that. Maybe Mr. Talley.
Thank you, Chairman Hollander, and you are correct. That would be me. And so there is a $550,000 budget that will be housed in OPI. And just a quick kind of basic breakdown of that. Well, first let me say that position will be reporting to me. And I think part of that move is the early iterations of GVI. There were discussions on all sides about where that position should be housed. Should it be in LMPD? Should it be in Ocean? Just exactly where is the best fit. And I think the decision was made that a more neutral Switzerland, if you would be a good place to put it, get it away from both of those entities to give it a separate place to sit. And so I think that drove the decision to move that position to GVI and to bring me on as the person that position would directly report to. That really is all about building trust and credibility in the community and with our partners in this. And if there were situations where there were questions about where it was housed, it was just felt that it would be best if we put it in a more neutral location, try to alleviate some of those concerns.
Thank you. And I should have said at the outset, for anybody in the public who may not know, GVI refers to Group Violence Intervention, and it's one of the strategies designed to reduce violent crime in the community. I'll get out of the queue now. Councilwoman McCraney.
Thank you, Chairman Hollander. I was very concerned with that. You asked my question, but I have some others, 2 others. But let me just say out loud that I don't understand why it is positioned in OPI, and I think we're going to be having a great conversation about that. So it just makes no sense to house it in that department, but that's an issue that we'll have to discuss further on. But hi, Dr. Mullins. I wanted to say hello to you and wanted to get some clarification. You were just recently in the youth development area, correct?
I was at Youth Detention Services.
The youth detention, yes. So could you give us a little bit about your background and how it relates to your being now? Did you take over Rivera's job?
Yes, she left it, I think, like mid-December, and I came on, I think, the end of December. But yes,
Okay.
I'd be happy to. Hello to you too. It's good to see familiar faces from everyone. So when YDS or Youth Detention Services, I'm sorry, try not to use acronyms. When Youth Detention Services was decommissioned during that very tough budget year that we had, I stayed and I was able to help transition Youth Detention Services to what is now known as Youth Transition Services. And I don't need to remind you all what all we went through to get that up and running, but that is running. And I transitioned that, and now Major Davis runs that organization, and I left and took a fabulous job with the state government for a while. And then when Ms. Moreno Rivera was leaving, I found out about the vacancy here and was very excited at the opportunity to come back and serve my city where I live. And I will say that my background is that I actually started and cut my teeth in Metro government here at OPI. So I started here working for the city in 2014, and I came in and I think at the time the job was called Organizational Performance Analyst, and I worked for all of the directors who you guys may be familiar with. So at that time it was Teresa Reno-Weber, Dara Mott, and then when innovation was brought into Metro government, we had the Bloomberg Philanthropies Innovation Grant. And when that ended, we brought innovation into the government and created actually a part of that, which is now in IT that Grace mentioned. I became an innovation project manager in OPI as well. So in that role, I worked for Ted Smith, for Grace Simrall. So I have a long background in Metro government, much longer here in OPI than I actually had with the detention center. But so my background is a developmental psychologist, data, statistics, research, numbers. So that's how I came to Metro government, and left and ran the detention center for the time that it was there, a wonderful opportunity. And so, yes, came back here when this position had a vacancy, and it's my pleasure to be here to work with you guys again and to serve the city.
Thank you for that. I think we just needed an overview because we do know how passionate you were in the Youth Detention Center. One other question, and I will get out and come back in. Could you tell us about just ordinary training, day-to-day training for the employees? Because it does not seem that OPI is that resource for the entire Louisville Metro government. I've not really ever understood if employees needed training, who really is responsible for that? And what is the process? And on top of that, will you be training on topics such as, soft training, such as interpersonal skills or anything to do with equity and inclusion and those types of subjects that help the employees become better employees and better constituents?
Sure, thank you. I will try to remember to get to all parts of your question. If I leave something out, please just refresh me. So OPI has a long history of actually directly providing a lot of training to Metro employees. So we have had things like project management, just training in the practice, all the way to lead employees up to being prepared to sit for their certification. We've provided training directly into Six Sigma Green Belt, into Lean, visual boards, kinds of continuous improvement things, and we've done that directly. We've also had a Metro government training fund historically that was funded upwards of about $100,000 a year. Again, this is just historically. And so what we would do is we would keep a list of those employees who were desiring some training or who had been identified as needing some training. And usually these were technical types of trainings that were really applied to their discipline and or their job. So if someone's job required an HR certification like SHRM, that training fund would be able to be used for that if their supervisor said this was something that would help them in their job or to do their job better. So we have provided that directly and indirectly via the training fund. So you're absolutely right with your observation, though, for currently that we are a little resource thin to be able to provide that training directly. We do have some carryover money from the training fund from 2020 just because it was one of those years where folks weren't in the building. It was kind of hard and we're all kind of rebounding. So we do have some training funds left for helping to deploy that out among Metro government. What our plan is right now, because we have so many priorities as we're building back from COVID and all of the other things and the work that we've been doing around equity and things like that, we're going to really try to make sure that the money that we do have, we apply it towards some of our biggest problems that we have in the city right now. So as projects are getting stood up in groups around ending homelessness and groups around reimagining public safety, advancing racial equity, and all those kind of high priority projects, we're going to try to make sure that the spending for that training fund aligns with that. So that is our plan for that. We are able to offer some training. So right now, because we are a little bit lean, as needed for projects, we will be providing training. So for instance, I mentioned Plan, Do, Check, Act, or PDCA, which is one of our tools that we use and OPI has rolled out metro-wide. As we have projects with agencies, we will do training that is project related to get everyone on board, speaking the same language and up to speed on the discipline and things like that. So we will be able to do that. And as we get fully staffed with our other 2 folks that we're looking to hire, we will have some bandwidth to roll out some of that training. You mentioned things like soft skills, and I couldn't remember some of the specific things that you mentioned. We haven't really done a lot of that. I do know that Human Resources does have a training catalog, and I believe it includes some of those topics that you might be referring to in terms of stepping into a supervisory role, or how do you deal with time management and things like that. HR does have a training catalog for that, and I'm not familiar with all of the things on there, but I think a couple of things that you were mentioning are in the HR training catalog. Okay. And help me if I missed any part of your question.
No, you've answered it. I thank you so much, Dr. Mullins. Welcome to that department.
Vice Chair Kramer.
Chair, welcome. I'm not sure exactly who the question's for, but I'll throw it out there and let you guys figure out who's best to answer it. My first question is about how much money the Fed sent our way in terms of the stimulus package. As I look through it, it looks to me like about $4,306,900, $1,080,094. So I'm just wondering where's the.
I'm not sure if you're comparing different time periods. If you're looking at across FY20 and FY21 for the $4 million, I don't have that report in front of me.
Everything I'm looking at is FY21. FY21 overtime is $61,000. There was originally $12,000 budgeted. It was revised up to $52,900. And then the FY22 is recommended at $68,500. I didn't ask that as a question. I'm just looking at FY21. $61,211.80 for overtime, plus the $1,018,000 for not budgeted or exceeded planned budgeted totals of $1,080,094. That accounts for what was spent there, but IT received $4,306,000. That's such a big difference. I would think Chris or Grace won. That'd be off the top of their head. Well, when you spend that much money, I think you know where you spent it.
What is standing out as a gap there?
You're looking at the $4 million, though. I apologize. I know that some of what they did was deploy computers in FY20. So I guess I'm just looking at the budget pages 174 and 175. There's no budget revision for $4 million. So I think that you're probably crossing fiscal years potentially.
Okay, so the stimulus money would have been FY20 instead of FY21?
Well, for the CARES funding, we spent $14 million initially, and then we had the drawdown of $26 million of salaries. So we spent $40 million of that in FY20, and then the remaining $94 million was expended in FY21.
And
I think you have to marry up to 2 years.
How was it distributed in C.I.T?
So there was about a $3 million computer rollout project that may not be accounted for here that was just closed out in the last couple of weeks. We were waiting on, when we deployed the computers, we received back about 1,100 of those devices that actually had some value, and we traded those back into Dell and received a credit that was just applied back to the CARES funding here in the last couple of weeks. So that seems to be the difference in the numbers that you're looking at, because that was around a $3 million project.
There you go. Thanks, Chris. As I said, that's an awfully big number. I would think that would be one that would jump off of a page at you. Thank you. I appreciate that, Chris. The next one, I might continue, Mr. Chair. I do have 2 others. I I guess looking back would be better than looking forward. So let me do the look back. I'll ask them a little bit out of order, Brett. LFIT is something we were all fond of talking about. As I recall, and the details are a little fuzzy, but I think we broke it into 3 phases, if I remember. One phase took us down into the deep West End. One phase took us out Dixie Highway. And I think the third phase was supposed to move us out towards, I want to say out towards Bardstown Road. I know we've been following how that's gone and the move, the taking LFIT into the deep West End. My understanding is that rollout went pretty well. I know as we did the reimagined Dixie Highway piece, I know there was a lot of work there, and as I understand that the technology moved out in that direction as well. I'm looking at the numbers. I was looking at the numbers. I don't have them right in front of me right this minute, but here I'm looking at the numbers, and there's $173,062 remaining in that LFIT from the 17 GO bond, general obligation bond. How far into phase 3, or are we into phase 3? 173,000. I don't know that does very much for phase 3, but
so we've done some engineering work that has led us to understand both the Greenbelt as well as Bardstown Road corridors. We do not obviously have enough money to move forward with that with what's in LFIT, but for Bardstown Road specifically, we're partnered with traffic engineering on a grant that was made available for a transportation piece that we feel can fill in most of that gap for the city network. In terms of the Greenbelt, we've also got the engineering completed for that. We don't have enough money yet to move forward with that piece, but we do understand the costs associated with it. And we did, as you're correct, we did have a very successful rollout into West Louisville. We hit some larger than expected expenses due to poles that had to be completely replaced in portions of the area, but everything is up and installed at this point, and our team continues to migrate locations over onto those connections. Even as recently as today, we were able to bring the Southwest Government Center down on Dixie Highway onto the network, which will eliminate a recurring bill that we were paying for that facility. So we're excited about the potential. There's already 11 sites that we've made direct connection into, and there's at least 5 more that we intend to complete by the end of the fiscal year.
Good, thanks. I was hoping to give you a chance to brag a little bit about LFIT. I mean, there's a lot of time, energy, and effort that went into that. And then my last question is kind of a follow-on to that, although not necessarily. As we are looking forward at the amount of money that the federal government is looking at in terms of the next package of money that's going to come, actually it's included in what's already out there, right? The Fed has already committed in that $388 million, a chunk of it towards fast, high-speed internet, and towards doing what we can to help people gain access. The pandemic made it clear that we have more folks in our community without access to the internet than we at first might have thought. And it also pointed out that some of the folks that don't have access, surprisingly enough, it's because there's literally physically not fiber near them, and another whole portion we found that they do have physical access. The problem is that there are impediments to their taking advantage of the service. So as you're looking at the federal funds that are coming, I was wondering if you could speak to both of those problems. What is it that we are planning for those folks for whom the internet is close? It's just a matter of, for economic reasons or whatever other reason might be, they're not hooking up to it, right? Like it's close, but they're not accessing it. And what's the discussion for increasing access to folks who can't get it? Specifically, and I'll just be very specific and blunt, what about outside of 265? There are lots of folks outside of 265 who don't have access to the internet, and it's not because they don't want to, or it's because, quite honestly, it's just not there. So it's 2 very different problems. I know the federal government is anticipating sending a lot of money our way, and I was wondering if you could speak to what our plans are for each of those 2 problems.
Certainly. So you're correct. There are multiple problems within our community, both from an affordability and an availability problem. Most of the federal programs that have been released so far tend to deal with the availability problem, although there are dollars obviously allocated for affordability issues, maybe not directly in the ARP money, but in other packages that have been made available. I think there's a few different funding streams that are available. Plus, there is now some state funds that have been allocated for areas that can't get the availability of service. And a lot of the infrastructure dollars specifically are targeted at where availability is lacking. And I will share personally that about 2 weeks ago, I drove through portions of District 19, 20, 22, all throughout outside the Gene Snyder, observing the polls and looking at what carriers didn't exist out there. And you're correct. What I can physically see is a lack of options or a lack of any kind of access for certain neighborhoods that are out there. Clark Station Road, you get out into Hopewell area. There are portions of those roads where I saw one line on the pole, and I'm fairly certain that it wasn't anywhere close to being able to serve the house. And then the other issue that we've got to deal with is that you've got some very large parcels of land that maybe sit a quarter to a half acre back from the actual street where the access is available. So you've got a couple different issues, because it may take significant infrastructure just to get that up the driveway to their home. And you're right, we do have plans to try to go after those types of issues with the dollars that are made available. At the same time, we have thousands of residents that can't afford access today. So we're focused equally on both of those, and we're hoping that more guidance will come out from the federal government as we move forward.
Thank you. At this point, I realize, long driveways and 5 acre lots, I get all that. But at this point, it's not a matter of getting fiber from the street up onto their however many acres of property. It's a matter of there's not even a fiber anywhere near their property. I mean, it's not even there. That's
correct. Yeah, it's a twofold problem, right? So there's no fiber to hook to at the street, and there's no fiber up the driveway once you get there. So it's gonna require some significant investment.
Thank you. Well, I'm encouraged to hear you say that you're looking at both of those things. Please, for my part, I would ask that you guys not overlook the fact that there are a substantial number of members of our community who it's not even close enough to their properties that they could log on if they wanted to. And with the federal money that's coming, if there were some way that we could make it more accessible, I think that would be really important. Thank you. Again, I know the pandemic, thankfully, I hope is behind us, and we won't have kids trying to log on, but the number of students who we had who couldn't get access to the internet was somewhat startling. Thank you.
Councilman Arthur, I see you in the queue. I am going to follow up briefly just on that point, though. So to Vice Chair Kramer's point, there is actually a project in the current budget, Project 60, Municipal Broadband Phase 1, and I had a question about it, actually. This project builds on the Louisville Broadband Plan, which will attempt to solve the digital divide for residents facing affordability and access issues. A variety of solutions will be deployed by the city in phases to address connectivity issues across the community. It's an $8.5 million project. It's listed as federal, which means essentially we're authorizing use of federal funds for that project. So we would not be borrowing money for that. We would not be using general fund money for that. My question is, one, what federal pot of money is this? Is this an appropriation of ARP local funds? Have the funding sources for this been identified? And if you could be any more specific about how that $8.5 million would be used if this item is approved.
Chairman, I'll speak a little bit to the funding source, and then I'll let C.I.T. speak to the use of the funds. But for the funding source itself, as we were putting the budget together, the General Assembly had released about $1 billion of the $2 billion that it is receiving through ARP at the end of its session. And it was for three large buckets. One was for to bolster the unemployment insurance fund, about half of that funding. A quarter of it was for water and wastewater treatment. And then another quarter was for broadband expansion to areas that were not served well. So it's possible that it could be a state pass-through. it's also possible that we could be recipient of the direct broadband funding from ARP, or we could use the city portion of broadband funding for ARP. So really, there's about 3 paths to get to that funding.
Let me follow up.
And I'm going to let I'll let CIT speak to the use.
Daniel, if I can follow up briefly, have we had, and that's a good point, at the very end of the General Assembly, that bill was passed. It was done proportionally by population, except for Jefferson County. That's another story. But do we know how much money we will be getting from state ARP funds for those 3 packages, sewer, water, or broadband?
I believe we have some information on the water and sewer. I don't believe we have confirmation yet on broadband.
Okay. Chris, do you want to talk about the use of the 8.5 in this project?
Well, we're obviously still waiting for some guidance from the federal government about the uses. If you look at the Treasury's interim final guidance today for the infrastructure piece, there are some very specific rules about what qualifies in terms of an investment for those dollars. And specifically, the way it's written today, that would dictate that we only use those infrastructure dollars in areas where access is unavailable, not where it's an affordability issue. Now, there are separate buckets of money that aren't in the infrastructure piece that deal with the affordability issue. So we've kind of got 2 different pieces in play here, and we're waiting for that guidance to finalize out before we go forward with a full plan, because we just don't know what all is going to be allowed. I know there's some discussion about revisions to the interim guidance that's been released.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Arthur.
Peace. I was looking at some of the equity goals. I guess this is C.I.T. Tech. I don't know. I'll throw the question out. Somebody could pick it up. And I was wondering about specificity when it comes to, there's goals of like hiring more minorities and going to minority job fairs. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, pointed out disparities in hiring across the minority community, showing that Hispanic, Latin Americans, 18% of the population, but 8% of employees in tech. Black Americans, 13% of the population, only 5% of employees in tech. Asian Americans, 6% of the population, 29% of employees in tech. And we know white Americans are well represented. Could you speak to what that looks like here locally? And then if your goal as far as more hiring goes could be more specific along making sure it reflects our MSA?
Certainly. And you're right. The numbers that we see nationally tend to trend down to the IT department here locally. We continue to struggle to attract candidates of minority race. It's been an ongoing struggle for us in the 3.5 years that I've been in the department. We have enacted opportunities to try to increase our recruitment through attending minority job fairs. We have done that. We have changed our interview panels to be more diverse, and we've even borrowed employees of more diverse backgrounds from other departments to sit in on those interview committees to help us to make it a more equitable type committee than coming in and seeing a bunch of folks that look like me when they sit across the table. So we're trying to make those changes. It is a problem. It's not that we're not trying, it's that we're not getting candidates to have the opportunity to interview. It's a very difficult problem, and I haven't solved that yet. I'd appreciate any assistance that you or the council could offer in terms of ideas, because we've enacted many of the goals that we've got on our equity plan and continue to struggle to fill those positions with a more reflective workforce.
And if I may, Councilman Arthur, I'd like to have Alicia Mclean, who's the Executive Director of our Future of Work Initiative, speak to this systemic problem that we're well aware of and are working through a separate initiative to try and resolve. Alicia.
And please introduce yourself with name and title, please. Thank you.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Mclean, Executive Director of the Future Work Initiative. Just want to say, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Speaking to the point made earlier, yes, it is. It's not something that is, it's not an easy lift. And what I found in my tenure with the Future Work Initiative is that it requires intentionality and a specific focus around identity and community. So I guess I'll go ahead and just use this opportunity to say a little bit about what we've done this past year. We have been very successful in our efforts in recruiting people from underrepresented groups into the field of data science and technology. And we've used a lot of intentionality around that, but I'm proud to report that folks who have taken our upskilling courses in data science, I actually have the percentages in front of me, but the majority of people who took these courses are African American female, which is astounding. Which is incredible, because if you look at actually the trends of who is participating in computer and data science, while some boats are rising with the tide, obviously it's a field that's dominated by white men. Black women have actually been on the decline since they started collecting data back in 2002. So this is a huge win. But I think that to the point that was made earlier, we will be judged not by the amount, and we should judge ourselves not by the amount of people that we train or the diversity of participants in our training programs, but in the diversity of participants who want jobs and that we actually place in jobs. And so with that, for that reason, we are placing that same intentionality around recruiting in placing the participants into family supporting jobs. And I will say it is not an easy task, but I am heartened. We are heartened by the success that we have had in the training piece of this initiative. And we will continue to apply that intentionality. We're deliberately partnering with two organizations, one that will actually work with employers, emphasizing that we are looking to fill jobs with a diverse workforce and continue the numbers that we have from our training programs, and two, to provide those wraparound services to folks, not necessarily because they don't know how to interview, but that they need to present themselves in a different way in a technology field. And for a lot of folks, this is their first foray into technology. And so it's about enhancing those tech portfolios, getting their GitHubs ready, making sure their LinkedIn profile is up to date, all of those things that employers are looking for and are considered standard for entering into the technology industry. So again, for us, for me, it's about intentionality around that. If it's about more than just access, while access is a huge problem, I don't want to push that down in any way. That's very much important. It's also very important that we are intentional around inviting underrepresented groups into the field and inviting them into into jobs in technology. The technology field is a much richer space with a diverse group of a more diverse group of people participating.
Thank you for sharing that. Because someone clarified the work that she's doing is in general across the city, but your equity goals are specifically about your department. Is that the case?
That's correct.
Okay. And just going back to what I said about specificity, that all sounds wonderful, but really being certain that we understand who you're talking about when we talk about increasing minority hires, because we really can't have increment if we don't understand the measurement. So I strongly encourage that to be the case. And I've been saying that for all of these equity goals, because people use the word minority like they use the word I. So going to my second question now, and I don't know if you're even the right department to be asking about this, but I didn't see anything, and I might have missed it, correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't see anything about being proactive about addressing automation happening. And, we know Louisville Forward has put out a study last year. We know that this is going to really impact Louisville and kill production, food service, transportation, administrative, in some cases, construction and agricultural jobs as well. Could someone speak to that if it is in there, or where I could find it, or where we could find it?
Yes, go ahead.
I'll jump in. Yes. And thank you, Councilman Arthur, for asking for that specificity. It is true. We do use it as a blanket term, and we need to be very intentional around what we are referring to. And yes, I am referring to the city of Louisville and not not specifically to Louisville Metro. To your question, it's a great question, and you and I have had a conversation about this, and it heightens the need for training in data science because, as I'm sure you know, which is why you're asking me, a lot of jobs are at risk of being lost to automation, and those jobs that are at risk of being lost to automation are going to be held primarily by Black and brown folks and folks from low socioeconomic status. And it's because of that, and because of that understanding of who it will affect the most, that we are intentional around our efforts of recruiting people from underrepresented groups. And I use that term not to be flippant or casual, but because not all minorities are underrepresented in the field of computer and data science. And so that's why we partnered with organizations like AMPT and LCCC, who we funded data science or funded for them to run programs on data science to their constituents, and they primarily serve a Black and brown population, and are with a particular focus around a certain lower socioeconomic status, because we really need these people. We really need more diversity in the field for a couple of reasons. Obviously, we're missing out on the innovations that could come from a diversity of background. But second, to your point, and I can't emphasize this enough, these jobs will be lost to automation. There is there's nothing we can do to stop it except to be prepared for it. And so that is why we are, like I said, so intentional around our efforts. It's imperative that we are, or we will continue to repeat the paradigm that has happened in the past. So that's really all I have to say about that. Point taken, point agreed with, and that's why we're very much intentional in our efforts.
Chairwoman Paula McCraney of the Equity and Inclusion Committee moved mountains to get the authors of the Brookings report about automation in Louisville to come to one of our committees. So if you all can be there, please attend. If we could work on legislation to address that, if we could put something in the budget to be proactive about addressing that, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out, because that's coming down the pipeline. I think 2030 it was predicted we would see that mass job loss, but we know that COVID-19 has moved that. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will be at that meeting.
Thank you, Councilman. Let me say also, this was sent, I think it was sent today, actually, a PowerPoint presentation on the Louisville Future of Work Initiative, which talks about some of the activities that's going on and some future plans. So we will get that loaded to the agenda. I don't think it's there yet, but we'll get it loaded to the agenda for the meeting for anybody in the public who would like to take a look at the work that's going on in this area. Councilman Winkler.
Chair Hollander, and I wanted to first start by piggybacking a little bit off Councilman Arthur's question and point about recruiting minorities into some of these jobs. And I think, we've got, if you think about the continuum of service that Metro government offers, I would strongly encourage you to partner with our groups like Youth Build and the Disconnected Youth Strategy, as well as Kentuckiana Works and Code Louisville, and maybe specifically spell out, these are the skill sets that we have in demand. Can they develop a specific tract within the Disconnected Youth Strategy that creates this talent for you? Are we actively recruiting minority applicants into those pipelines? And then you're sitting there on the back end ready to offer them a job after their successful completion of those programs. So I would strongly encourage you to think about partnering across those organizations.
Councilman Winkler, you're absolutely right. Just wanted to respond that we are partnered with the Summer Works program and have had interns with us here, not last year, obviously, but most summers we've had interns with us, as well as we're partnered with the academies of Louisville to try to bring in computer science students as they get later into their careers in high school to try to give them some on-the-job experience.
Which I think is great, but those kids aren't going to be ready to come work for us 3 months out, right? I mean, they've got further education that they've got to complete. So I'm thinking more people that are, and I don't want to diminish that work. I think what you're doing there is critical, but I think in terms of actually filling these positions in the near term, some of these organizations that are focused on a slightly older demographic, right, where they're already in the workforce or workforce ready, is where I would encourage you to look as well. I did want to ask one question, going back to the questions that Councilman Kramer had around access of fiber, right? Can you talk a little bit about sort of what's Metro's strategy around, are we an ISP? Are we paying for people's service? If we lay this fiber, are we going to be providing the internet service? Because I think, certainly we've got connectivity issues across Metro, right? And we've certainly talked about in whether it's in the West End, whether it's South Louisville, whether it's in Councilman Benson's district. But I'd even highlight here in Anchorage, we don't have fiber optic options here because it's expensive for them to run because the houses aren't close together. And, so where do you see sort of the private sector's role as you think about the community as a whole, right? Where's the private sector going to lay the infrastructure? Where's Metro going to lay the infrastructure? And then what's our strategy for whether we just pay for service and wait for the private sector to deliver it according to the demand, or we're actually going to run that infrastructure in the areas where maybe the density doesn't exist today, but you want to lay the groundwork so that, that's a lot of times I think where government's role is, right? Is you're sort of that first dollar in to build the infrastructure where you want to see that future investment. So Chris would like to understand the strategy for how you see it.
Becoming an ISP requires a heavy investment, not just from an infrastructure standpoint, but in ramping up a whole new, basically, department to operate and maintain that. So that doesn't come without some pretty hefty costs. That said, we have had previous studies done. They date back some years. I believe the overlay to do a countywide build was upwards of $1 billion in the estimates. So there's a heavy capital outlay, and then you have to have personnel and staff to take care of that. You have to have the customer service to go with it. You're essentially recreating the Louisville Water Company to provide a broadband type service at that point. And that's not to say that that's the wrong direction to go. It's just a significant investment that I think would require a lot of community discussion about if that's what is the will of the people. In terms of our role, I do think that we can fill a gap in terms of it's not just about us being an ISP or paying someone to do it. There are other solutions that exist, such as open access networks that we build the infrastructure, but we don't actually provide the service to the residents. And then ISPs can attach to that service because it's not economical for them to build into that area. And I think that is a gap that the city could fill if we chose to do that in terms of an infrastructure build. And with these federal programs that exist, depending on how they're worded and laid out, it is something that we could explore. That said, in discussions with the existing incumbent ISPs, they've also entertained an appetite for reverse auction type deals where we list out locations where we know service doesn't exist and they bid to try to get funding to build those areas out. So there's a couple different ways to go about this. I wouldn't want to sit in the IT department and tell you guys what we should do because I think this is a bigger, broader community discussion. But I don't think any of them are wrong. I think there's just varying levels of expense and effort that are required.
Yeah, I think it's a good discussion worth having. I mean, I might ask that, whether it's at a future budget meeting or public works or wherever that maybe we have that conversation, right? And sort of talk through like, what are the different options? What are the recommendations for, here's sort of the, we do everything and this is what it would cost and what it would mean versus, this is, we do nothing and this is what it would cost and this would mean. And this is sort of where we would recommend we are somewhere on that continuum that's going to most quickly get the highest speed service possible to the maximum number of residents at the lowest cost. Because to, Councilman Arthur's point, I mean, if you lack that connectivity, you lack access, not just to the internet, but access to opportunity. And that is fundamental. Thank you.
Chris, I've got a couple of specific questions about the budget. First of all, we heard, I think, from OPI regarding new positions in the project management side. I believe you have a couple of additions that are proposed in technology as well. Could you talk about that and the need for that?
Sure. So within the IT space, we've seen an uptick in the consumption of services. While I did not present every slide within your packets, you should have seen a numbers slide that showed you some of the business that IT's been involved with, and several of our areas are feeling a pinch. We're seeing increased demand for services. It's taking longer for us to troubleshoot in some instances because we have employees working from their residence that introduces an extra layer of complication versus employees all being on a network that we can see end to end and troubleshoot. So we're spending more time on the phone with folks. We're getting more calls than we used to. And so we're looking to supplement in the areas where we're seeing increased demand in the department. Ultimately, I think we could keep as many people busy as we receive, but we're happy with whatever extra headcount we can get help with at this point.
And I think are there two new positions proposed? Is that correct?
I'd have to go back and check my book. I believe it's just one.
Just one. Okay. All right. Thank you. The biggest increase in the budget, in the proposed budget for civic innovation and technology, is not in personnel. It's in particularly software maintenance and software sharing agreement. And those are substantial increase. Particularly the software maintenance is really almost a $2 million, $1.9 million increase. Can you talk about that from the last year's budget?
Sure. So there's a few different cost components involved. One is we have the new DocuSign subscription service that we have obviously rolled out to our employees. That's netting millions of pages being processed, and that is about $690,000 of the increase. In addition, we have seen an increase in our Microsoft licensing as we've brought on contact tracers and other contract resources that are using LouisvilleKY.gov email addresses to communicate. That requires an Office 365 subscription, as well as we're using a secure workspace for them to work in since they're possibly touching HIPAA data. And then we're also looking at an increase in our WebEx consumption. We obviously have had millions of meeting minutes conducted on this platform. When we went into this year, we didn't really have an understanding of how much consumption there would be, but it is a consumption-based service, so we've had an increase there as well. And then we just had a normal rate increase with our Microsoft agreement as well, so that on top of the added licenses has added some costs.
Let me ask about DocuSign and WebEx. Presumably, there will be reduced use of those services in the coming months. We don't know to what extent. I don't know that anybody thinks that things will go back to what they were pre-pandemic in this business or in any other business. Are those software licenses based on the amount of use? And so has the budget item been put in based on sort of what we're doing this year, and potentially you could actually use less of that next year if we return to a less virtual state, I guess?
So the DocuSign was at a minimum commitment. We think it may trend over if we continue on the path that we're on, but we think that the number that we put there is a fair estimate. But that is our commitment to continue to use at the volume that we've been at, which we're not seeing any decline at this point in the use of that platform. Now, WebEx is also consumption-based, but we can and will adjust that as consumption of the service goes downward. So that there is an annual renewal on that, and when that renewal hits, they will look back at the last 12 months and average that out for the renewal.
And let me just say about DocuSign, and you've pointed out some of the paper costs, but also just managing processes. I think there are clearly advantages, whether we're all in the building or not, to have more electronic signature capabilities.
It really has moved us forward.
Councilwoman McCraney.
This is on the lines of Ms. Mclean's job. I understand that you will be at our meeting on June the 3rd with the AI conversation. And I noticed that when I asked for your information, I was given an email address that was outside of Louisville Metro government. So I wanted to know if your connection is as a consultant role, or are you an employee of Louisville Metro government? And can you tell us a little bit about your job function in the area of, what is the job title? Something about the future.
Yes, Councilperson McCraney, thank you for your question. So the Future of Work Initiative is a partnership between Microsoft and the City of Louisville. The positions are housed in Louisville Metro government, but our emails are kind of outside of Louisville Metro government. That was just kind of the way it was when I came on. As far as what I do, so basically it's a big project, and the idea is that Louisville is an area that is at high risk of losing jobs to automation. It's also a place that could be a great opportunity to prepare folks for the data economy. In the past 3 technology revolutions, we have not been intentional in our efforts in including underrepresented groups, underrepresented minorities in particular in the field. So my job is to basically serve as a connector, provide training opportunities. Sometimes I'm working with educational institutions and connecting them with industry to make sure that their curriculum is aligned. I've also designed an informatics pathway for JCPS that's specifically focused around equity and data science, and that's being piloted in Central High School. Also started the Butterfly Project, which is an initiative, a partnership between Central High School and Bellarmine University, where students learn data analytics for the purposes of supporting a community nonprofit around those 5 core tenets outlined in the Path Forward document: jobs, justice, health, housing, and education. We're also helping to stand up a data science for good, or data science for social innovation pathway at Simmons College, in addition to working with JCPS around a data analytics for all curriculum that every student would take. And that sort of data analytics for all is maybe the foundation of what we're trying to do. My specific focus and my framework coming on board as executive director, and I just started about a month ago, is to make Louisville a regional hub for AI and social innovation. And that's a lofty goal. I'm sure. I know it is a lofty goal, but I think that we're the home of Breonna Taylor, and we're the home of Muhammad Ali, and social justice should not be anathema to us. And I think of technology as a medium and an empowerment tool that can be used for social innovation, that can be used for community empowerment. And so everything that we're doing is centering our efforts around accomplishing that goal of thinking of technology and of data science as a medium, not only for workforce development, not only to increase diversity and inclusion in the field, but also as a means for social innovation. Councilperson McCraney, did that answer your question? And if not, I'm more than happy to.
I did it. I look forward to hearing from you on June 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see anyone else in the queue. I do want to just point out, maybe ask if Chris wants to discuss any of these. When we look at the capital budget, we've talked about how much money we have in the capital budget, frankly, how much money we would propose to borrow. A significant amount of that is in the information technology space. So we have $9 million. This is actually listed as OMB, but it's an enterprise resource planning project, which I assume IT has a significant amount of involvement in. There's $12.4 million for computer-aided dispatch and records management system. There's $2.2 million to enhance network infrastructure and cybersecurity. So, as we talk about, we're borrowing a lot of money. A lot of this is going into information technology. And Chris, you may want to speak a little bit directly about the new project, the computer-aided dispatch. I mean, it appears to me this is not discretionary for us. What we have is pretty much out of life. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, without divulging some specific details, what I will say is that we are time constrained in the amount of time that we have left to perform an upgrade on the computer-aided dispatch and records management systems. As I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, we installed those systems in 2004 and 2005. And you can probably recall what your smartphones, or probably more likely your Blackberries, looked like in 2004 and 2005, and the technology that was available then. Most of these platforms are residing on legacy operating systems and are in desperate need of an upgrade. We are efforting currently. We have the RFP and an evaluation right now, and we are hoping to award in early July with about an 18-month runway after that, but we do not have any time left on the clock beyond this to finish this project. We have to finish as soon as that 18 months is up.
And is this one of the projects that we can anticipate a further appropriation next year?
There is the potential for a closeout appropriation for this. We're obviously still in the selection process, but we have seen the estimates of the ranges at this point. And so we know there's the possibility for a slight closeout need for this in the last year of the project.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see anyone else in the queue. I appreciate everybody being here this afternoon. Thank you, Grace, Chris, the whole team. We know how difficult all of this has been in the pandemic, particularly keeping Metro government operating when folks stayed home to be safe. And I know when you gave me the iPad to conduct these meetings, I had no idea that I was going to be spending as much time looking at it. As I've said before, I think I've spent more time looking at that iPad than I have some of my family members, and it's sort of nice to be back in chambers, I'll say that. But thank you for making things work throughout the pandemic for us.
You bet.
Unless anybody has anything else, without objection, we will be adjourned. We will see you again tomorrow for the next budget hearing. Thank you.